That was a Christmas night game, Ravens and 49ers, and Mike Florio had a whole lot to say leading into that game. And of course, he had to eat his words. And as a result, a lot of people now refer to him as Mike Flores or Mike Florist. Of course, Lamar Jackson called him some combination of the two on his way off the field after the Ravens put a spanking on the San Francisco 49ers, which of course was a significant win just in general, but it put the finishing touches on last year's MVP award for Lamar, MV2. Perhaps MV3 is coming up on deck for him. But did Mike just bring a little bit more to the table here a year later? Did he provide Lamar Jackson and the Ravens with a sliver of bulletin board material? I'll let you be the judge of that, courtesy of Pro Football Talk here earlier today.
A history of thriving in the postseason. Lamar Jackson has a history of failing in the postseason. And when Lamar Jackson tries to talk his way out of his history, he only puts more pressure on himself. When he comes out and says, I feel more nervous, I feel more antsy in the postseason, but I'm past that now. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because when you go out there for the first drive of a game that is win or go home, when you're favored by 9.5 points, you will feel the pressure. Oh, yes, you will. Now, how will you deal with it? That remains to be seen. But the pressure only increases until you change the narrative. The pressure on you arising from the existing narrative only gets stronger and stronger. That's where I'm torn on this, because I could see Russell Wilson not fumbling at the 3-yard line, not throwing a pick six to Marlon Humphrey.
Right.
I could see Lamar Jackson, something screwy happening there, and missed field goal by Justin Tucker. I just think, and this reminds me, and I think we said this earlier in the week as well, when Dan Campbell said to Kevin O'Connor after the Sunday night game, maybe we'll see you in a couple weeks. The pressure's all going to be on the Lions if there's a rematch there. The pressure's all on the Ravens. At home, 9.5-point favorites, 34-17, a misleading final score. It was 17 all late in the second half. I'm not ready to pick the Steelers. I can't do it. I thought about it. I can't do it. I'm going to split the baby here. 27-23, although I think if the Ravens win, they'll cover. And if the Steelers cover, they'll win. I'm taking one or the other here. Ravens win, Steelers cover, because I really couldn't go all in with one or the other.
Okay, Mike Florio, courtesy of Pro Football Talk, and you heard the quote, and here's part of the transcription. When Lamar Jackson tries to talk his way out of his history, meaning from a postseason perspective, he only puts more pressure on himself. When he comes out and says, quote, I feel more nervous, I feel more antsy in the postseason, but I'm past that now. Then Mike goes on to say, no, you're not. Because when you go out there for the first drive of a game that's win or go home, when you're favored by 9.5 points, you will feel the pressure. Oh, yes, you will. Before I react to those specific comments, let's go back to Lamar's, the actual comments that Mike, in a sense, is paraphrasing. And I think some along the national media lines have actually misrepresented. I was listening to First Take earlier this morning, and Elle Duncan was a panelist today, along with Stephen A. Orlovsky and Molly. And she said something along the lines of paraphrasing that Lamar said that he's seeing ghosts. No, that's not what he said at all. This is what he said.
I don't really think I was young in the beginning, and it happened fast. It don't happen fast, but the only one I do, to be honest with you, the only one I do think about is the AFC Championship. That's probably the only playoff game I do think about. It was right there, but my mind, I'm focused now. Though, it is what it is at this point.
What did you think about in that game?
We lost. That's it.
Lamar, do you have to remind yourself not to be too amped up for games of this stakes? Is that something that in your career you've sort of, I don't want to say battled, but is that something you still have to remind yourself to settle down in these games?
Yeah, I just be too excited. That's all, too antsy. I'm seeing things before it happen, I got to calm myself down. But just being more experienced, I found a way to balance it out.
Let's rewind that once more.
Yourself to settle down in these games?
Yeah, I just be too excited. That's all, too antsy. I'm seeing things before it happen, I got to calm myself down. But just being more experienced, I found a way to balance it out.
Okay. He's not seeing ghosts. He's seeing things before they happen, meaning his mind is racing because he's probably over-prepared for these games, that he's seeing things before they happen. There's an antsiness, which is obviously a normal reaction, a normal human reaction, particularly for a guy who has had his fair share of struggles throughout a 6-game sample size where he's gone 2-4. Of course, he's had 2 bye weeks because of dominant regular seasons in 2019 and, of course, last year in 2023. So, again, in no way should that be interpreted as he's seeing ghosts. There's an antsiness that he's got to figure out. He figured it out in the second half of the Houston game and, of course, came out flat as a team in the AFC Championship game at home against Kansas City. Back to Florio's comments. When Lamar tries to talk his way out of his history, he only puts more pressure on himself. He's not trying to talk it. He's just answering a question. That's completely exaggerated. When he comes out and says, I feel more nervous, he never said that. He used the word antsy, and then Mike goes on to use that specific word. But I'm past that now. No, you're not, he says. Well, how do you know, Mike? Because when you go out there for the first drive of a game that's win or go home, when you're favored by 9.5 points, you will feel the pressure. Oh, yes, you will. Okay, that's Mike's take. There's no question. I'm not disputing that Lamar isn't going to feel pressure. This is a high-pressure situation. But the guys on the other side of the field will feel a similar amount, if not more, particularly given the current status of Mike Tomlin, the longest tenured head coach in this league, someone who has not won a playoff game in Pittsburgh since 2016. We can talk about John Harbaugh's record, underwhelming record since the 2012-2013 Super Bowl run. One thing he has done is won playoff games since then. Mike Tomlin has not since 2016. But again, that's neither here nor there since we're focusing on the Ravens component of this. And what I want to focus on is what the Ravens can do, what Todd Monken can do specifically to set his QB1 up for success. And of course, that starts with establishing a run game right out of the gate with a player that you did not have the luxury of having this time last year. A 31-year-old de-aging, ascending running back who had career years, and a career year, I should say, in a multitude of categories and statistical categories throughout the running back community. Greg Olsen, who's called at least one of the Ravens games this year, a tremendous Fox analyst, had this to say about how he feels like Todd Monken, John Harbaugh, and the Ravens offensive staff can get Lamar going early and then sustain that. This is courtesy of The Herd with Colin Cowherd.
There are times that I see players in Major League Baseball, the NBA, or football, they have a ceiling, and they get to the playoffs against the very best, and they hit the ceiling. And then there's Peyton Manning or A-Rod until the Yankees, or Aaron Judge, or Lamar Jackson. It's not a ceiling thing. They're clenching their teeth too hard. Lamar came out and said, I just get too antsy in these games. And, and so like Aaron Judge dropping a fly ball, that's not Aaron Judge. That's not a ceiling thing. So how do you break through it? Bill Polian once told me with Peyton Manning, he said, Peyton, you're a teeth clencher. Give yourself a break. You make me uptight being around you in playoff game. And Peyton got some wins and got through it. How does Lamar do that?
Yeah, well, I think the last thing you just said, right, the Peyton example is sometimes in order to get through something, the only option is that's the way, right? The obstacle is the way. The only way through it is through it. So I think it's going to take one playoff win. I think it's going to get off to a fast start, right? And I think that's where coaches, I think Todd Monken's done a masterful job there since Harbaugh brought him in. We talked about this in our game we covered a couple weeks ago. He said that Harbaugh's done an unbelievable job surrounding Lamar Jackson with the right coordinator at the right time. And early in his career, they built it around his run. And now with Todd Monken, they've really he makes a bigger impact as a passer than he does as a runner. And that's kind of crazy to say for a guy like Lamar Jackson. So the point being made is understand who he is, understand what he does well, understand the emotion, the character, again, the relationship between coach, play caller, and in this case, the quarterback, get him off to a really fast start. Call the plays that he loves. Call the plays he's had success with. See completions. See the ball go into the hands of your player. Get him tackled. Run. All the things that are the magic and the beauty of Lamar Jackson. You know who he is as a person. You know the caliber he wants to play at, and you know how much pressure he's putting on himself. You've got to coach around it. You've got to help him through that early in games, early in series, and let him settle into the first playoff game this weekend. And then you know what? One win turns into two. All of a sudden, he gets that off of his back, and he's the Lamar Jackson that we've seen now for years, and potentially could win another MVP. So I can't stress enough X's and O's and who can draw the best plays. We are seeing week in and week out all across the NFL the coaches that understand the relationships and the motivations of their players, playing to their strengths. Who are they as people? What motivates them? What scares them? Where are their weaknesses? Man, those guys that have a pulse of their players in their locker room are the reason you look around and they win the amount of games. That's Dan Campbell. That's Sirianni. That's Kevin O'Connell. That's Harbaugh. And so many of these guys, like, there's no question Harbaugh, Todd Monken, they know this. They know who Lamar is. They know the level of expectations he has for himself. They're going to do a good job settling him to this game this weekend and saying, hey, the better start we get, the more comfortable and the more pressure, the less pressure he feels. And when he feels no pressure, he's Lamar Jackson. And we see the magic that comes with him.
Well said there from former NFLer and current Fox analyst Greg Olson. And it's all about making sure that Lamar gets settled in. And he'll have to do so without his Pro Bowl 1,000-yard receiver, Zay Flowers, who John Harbaugh officially ruled out earlier today. Zay will not play in Saturday night's contest against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is dealing with a knee injury. He was referred to as a long shot all week. And so now, hey, survive in advance and you give Zay another week and potentially an opportunity to play in the divisional round weekend, which you would think is going to be in Buffalo, barring something unpredictable or perhaps an upset by the Denver Broncos. With no Zay, what does that mean? Well, first and foremost, like I said, you want to establish a ground game early, right off the jump. And obviously, that hinges on protecting the football. The first time around, Derrick Henry, a very uncharacteristic mistake. The first time these two teams met up, coughing up the football on the opening drive. We know that Lamar threw an interception in that game as well, which is one of those that you have an asterisk around it because of the incredible play that Peyton Wilson made to wrestle the football from Justice Hill. That's like that's just like a freakish type of play. You minimize those types of blunders, those self-inflicted blunders, right? And you minimize the amount of negative plays. You play clean football. You put points up on the board like we know that they are absolutely capable of doing. And you play disciplined football. What has plagued this team time and time again is the lack of discipline from a penalty standpoint, stalling out drives. You do those things, I just don't see how the Steelers can keep up with the Ravens solely from a point scoring standpoint. This is an offense in Pittsburgh that is struggling to move the ball. George Pickens has not been a reliable target for them in recent times. He's had some in-game antics that served as a distraction. And it's a group that outside of Pickens, because when he's going, look out, that dude's a dog. But if you take him out of the game, I just don't see how Pittsburgh can hang with the explosiveness and all the different ways that Todd Monken and this offensive unit can attack you. And I don't even care if Pittsburgh takes Mark Andrews out of the game, because in the past, they've had a lot of success going into games against the Ravens and saying, hey, you know what? We refuse to be beaten by Mark Andrews. We will not allow 89 to beat us. Well, the good news is you got 22, you got 8, you've got 7, you got 80, and so on and so forth. And that is the investment that the Ravens made from a skill position standpoint over the last couple of years, to be in a position where you lose a Zay Flowers, and sure, you'd rather have Deontay Johnson out there providing some depth. That experiment obviously didn't work out in the slightest. But the Ravens now live in a world where you lose your number one wide receiver, And it's not as if the sky's falling. And it certainly hasn't always been like that throughout the Lamar Jackson era. Chris Sims, Mike Florio's co-host, didn't mince words about the way he feels like this game's going to go come Saturday night.
To go with the Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to whoop that ass. I do.
Oh.
The Steelers are done. Whoop that ass. I do. I think the Ravens are going to whoop that ass. I think the Ravens are going to whoop that ass. I think the Ravens are going to whoop that ass. I do. The Steelers are done. 4 in a row. They got their ass whooped 3 weeks in a row. And then, okay, put up a fight against the Bengals, who have one of the worst defenses in football. And they did make a few plays, right? I didn't like the look of how Pittsburgh's defense just got absolutely ran over by Derrick Henry the first time. Lamar made a uncharacteristic interception in the red zone because Rashad Bateman stopped. I'm going to say I'm like with what your first thought was. I think the Ravens are going to come out on fire here. I think it's going to be the kind of game where it's like 35-7, and the Steelers are going to like maybe score 2 later touchdowns to make it look respectable. I'm going to go 35-20 Ravens.
Just once more.
Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to whoop that ass. With the Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to whoop that ass.
Tell us how you really feel, Chris Sims, right in front of Mike Florio, too, after he was casting all kinds of doubt. Now, he did pick the Ravens. It's notable that Mike is siding with the Ravens. And I would expect most to be picking the Ravens because, again, I just don't feel like Pittsburgh has the capability, particularly on the road, to hang with the Ravens. Now, I do feel like this is going to be a game that will feel close for the majority of it, but I do think the Ravens end up covering. Do I love that, though? It's a 9.5-point spread right now. Candidly, I have not come up with a score prediction yet, as I've teased many times throughout the last couple of days. I am siding with the Ravens, but I do have a few more hours to decide. We'll make sure that we announce predictions specifically in tomorrow's show. It's going to be 12 noon Eastern with ESPN's Brooke Pryor. So I look forward to that. And I got a few more hours to prep, but I think it'll be right around that spread. And I think the Ravens are going to handle business.